Alright, everybody. It's that time again. It's time for the writing time. Now it's a time earlier by 1 hour. I'm very tired. We're talking about playtesting your writing today. And yes, that is a thing. And I will explain why it is so important. I think it's week 4. I don't really know. Time is fake. But no, it's not fake. This workshop. What is playtesting?
It's putting your stuff in front of other people, other humans, who then give you their opinions on your stuff.
Yes. You're putting your heart and soul in the embodiment of a game out in front of other people, and they will tear to shreds in front of you and spit on it like it is the dirt that comes from the deepest parts of the earth. That doesn't sound very good. But it is something you want to do because it's important to make it not the dirt of the earth, make it the gold of the earth. That's words. Yeah. We teach a lot in this club about like iterative development and like rapid prototyping, and part of that is to playtest after each prototype so you see what went well, what didn't go well. So for your next cycle, sprint, whatever you guys use, you can build off of that feedback and improve it and fix the parts that weren't very good. So, do you need to play test your project? Yes, you do. And that includes your writing. Even if you just started, you need to play test your project. But you're a writer. I don't care if you're a writer. Go play test your writing. And yes, that is the thing. Why do writers need to playtest? Have y'all ever heard of, editors or publishing houses for big boy books? Yeah, they don't just write that all in one go and then just send it off and make a New York Times bestseller. They go through like dozens and dozens of editing cycles before it ever hits bookshelves.
And the proofs look a little something like that.
Yeah, it looks something like that. That's a book. How many editing cycles did that take?
That is the first beta draft.
The first beta draft.
So I made my own personal edits, but this is the first time other people have read the full novel as a novel.
Put this up to the camera so everyone can see it more up closely. Not for resale. If you resell this, I come to your house and stab you in the head.
Yeah, that's an Amazon thing. When you order author proofs from them, they're like, oh yeah, watermark.
Yeah, big boy watermark. So yeah, just like any other part of the game where you're testing your programming, so you don't clip out of bounds, you don't, etc. You have to play test your audio to make sure that audio cues are working and it reads well, same with your art. Writing is no exception to that. You need to edit and play test your writing to make sure that it actually makes sense. So in terms of game development, we have stuff called like beta and alpha readers, like Dana's saying with the beta draft of that book. They essentially just read your book or your game, and like any other playtest, tell you what's good, what bad, what needs to change. But instead of really playing something, they're reading. Remember when people used to read? And now we just tap on books and they do nothing? Boomer humor. But it's the same thing. You're trying to workshop what you wrote and make it better. So when it comes to the final project, it's actually good. Oops. Yeah, there we go. So there's two ways that writers in game development can play test their writing. The first way is before you even put the writing into your game, you play test this. I prefer this method because it's a lot easier to just change a couple words or whatever on a Google Doc or like Twine than it is to have to like open up an interview project and start messing around with like Fungus or Dialog System, whatever you're using. It's a lot more user-friendly, and people can just like get straight to the meat instead of having to go to like different NPCs and whatnot to understand writing. So I personally prefer this method. And even if it's not implemented into the game and thus is lacking like the environmental ambiance to really sell the product, you can still play test it and it works fine. It's just like a screenplay or just like little short stories or blurbs. Like even though it's missing like part of the element that really makes it come to life, you could still workshop it and get a lot of really useful feedback on it. Really, the thing is that it doesn't have to be in the game already, like good to go, in order for you to playtest it. You could just go straight from once you have stuff on paper. You can start iterating with rapid prototyping. Or if you don't want to take my advice, first of all, I hate you. Second of all, for legal reasons, that is a joke. You could, I guess, do it in the game. Like I said, the advantages are you do get the ambiance of having it already in the game and in the context that you encounter this narratively. But again, once you want to edit that, it becomes a lot more tricky and just kind of annoying. But if you want to put more work on yourself, then say that be. So essentially what you would do for this is that you're playing the game and you can either watch their screen share on like a Zoom call if you're doing it remotely. If they're doing it in person, you can just sit next to them and just like and then you slap them whenever they miss an NPC dialogue. For legal reasons, that is also a joke. So what kind of things do you ask a playtester when they're trying to play the game and you want good writing feedback? Don't do what cops do and ask leading cop questions. That means asking stuff like, how great was this interaction with this NPC? Don't you just love him already? No. That predisposes them to have an opinion about something. And as much as we don't want to hear it, we need just like the honest truth about our writing. So, do you remember in high school, whenever you read a novel in a class and you hated it, but every like paragraph or couple pages you have to stop and like talk in groups for like 5 minutes and say what you thought about it? That's essentially what you're doing with a playtest, but this time you're the teacher. But it's for something good. So after every like big important bit of dialogue that you're really trying to hone in on, you can just ask them a couple questions. And again, non-leading questions, so just be like, did you really understand something about like the characters or the plot from this piece of dialogue or this item description or scene or whatever? What information did you get from these particular lines? Did you understand something more about like what's going on in the world or your quest, etc.? If you've been to our previous writing workshops, which you should have, you've heard us talk about the SIU triangle a lot: short, interesting, useful. When you're playtesting your dialogue and item descriptions, etc. in your game, that's what you're looking for. You're asking them, do you find this piece of dialogue or scene short, interesting, and or useful? And if one of those is not true, ask them why they thought that way and how they would want it to be instead. I'm going to make the chat a little bit so you can see the rest of the slide. So yeah, ask them to point out like specific parts that they might have really liked and they want to see more of, or if they thought was like really vague or unclear or just really went on for too long and they just could not really understand. Elden Ring could really have used that. The pacing. So we're writers. We like to write a lot. Gamers have the attention span of a goldfish and just want to play a game. And so if you write like a paragraph for every single dialogue interaction, they will just stop caring and just mash. And suddenly they don't know what to do on their quest. So if they ever were bored, ask them that and see why they were bored. Most likely than not, your pacing is off and you need to shorten it. Then the characters. You know, see which ones that they like better. If they liked a different character than is your favorite, see why they like that one more so than your personal favorite, and see if there's something about juxtaposition of personality between etc. Stuff like that. So, you do all this, you stare at them intensively, you look deeply into their eyes and peer into their very soul. What do you do with all that data now? Well, the first things first is that not all of it is going to be valuable to you. And there's a very important distinction here. In the feedback that you get from people from playtesting, not all of it is going to be useful. Now, that doesn't mean to say that all the negative or more critical feedback is the bad feedback that you can just ignore and move on with. Not necessarily. Bad feedback is just stuff that you can't really. How'd go? Yeah, Patrick joining. Bad feedback is essentially just stuff that you can't really work with. Not stuff that you would have to change necessarily, but like, if they just don't like the story as a whole, well, if it's already set in stone, then you can't really change too much of it. So, you can't please everyone. Like, it's just not possible. There's millions of gamers out in the world, and millions of people who just like different games, all different from each other. Some people really like the writing in Firewatch, some people hate it. Some people really like the gameplay of League, some people hate it. You're never going to please every single person who plays your game, and you just kind of have to accept that, and that absolutely applies to the writing. Not everyone is going to enjoy the characters. Not everyone is going to, like, at the end of the day, it's not a game that everyone who plays it made. It's a game that you made. And at some point, if the feedback is just saying, change this, change that, you kind of just have to put your foot down and say, this is what I want to make, and I will make it. So, with some feedback where it's just wanting way too radical of a change or diversion of a character or story, if it's something that is manageable and something that you could do in the scope of like however long your game is, for us it's 10 weeks for our quarter game projects, then yeah, you can tinker with it and playtest it again and see if people like it more. But if some of the feedback you get just is way too high scope or dramatically changes so much of the game that you are making, then you kind of just have to say no and live with that, because again, it is your game. That being said, if you want to ignore someone's complaint about a specific thing because you like it better, that again is fine, but if a lot of people are saying that, then you do have to really take it into consideration. Yeah? And also, don't just take feedback at face value. Like, if someone is being super hypercritical about your game, it could really just be hinting at something that's really underlyingly needs to be changed about your game or your writing. So, feedback is a very tricky thing. Like, there's a reason why usability in QA is a job in and of itself, because it requires a lot of practice and experience working in QA to really understand the good feedback from the bad feedback. And sometimes it's just kind of in the mix, and you don't really know what is what. But you make the most of it. So, this is a very gray zone of writing playtesting. So, just do your best, and the important thing is just to playtest your writing in the first place. That's really the best advice I can give you. And just see for yourself what you can make of it. Yeah? Yeah. So, now we get to tear your things to shreds. So if you have any writing for a quarter-long game project that you've been doing, or some other project outside, Dane, you have a book?
I have a paper copy. And
Dane
paper
has
copies are kind of a bitch to get a hold of.
Now read
But
it.
but I can send a digital copy to anybody who wants one.
So what game is it?
It's not a game, it's my book.
Oh, is it? Is it what?
Yeah.
Is it novel?
Yeah, it's my fantasy novel I've been working on for like 2 fucking years.
I have a question. Like, how do you commit to a long enough project?
It bothers me when I leave it in a drawer and I'm like, I gotta finish this.
Yeah.
And then as I'm working on it, it keeps growing.
Yep. So great.
It works.
Sort of.
I mean, there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions about writing playtesting? Alright. Well, that being said, I'm going to end the stream and Zoom from here. If anyone wants to send in your writing that you want to get playtested to the VGDC Discord, you can absolutely do so. And whoever has time to look at it, will look at it. Otherwise, thank you for attending. Get out of my Zoom call. I wasn't even logged into my own. Oops.
The infinite screens when it's streaming is a good way to explain how recursion works.
Yep. If anyone's watching and